el moderador. Buenos días a todos.
Hello, good morning, everybody. We'll continue with the second round table. But first of all, I will speak a few words. This is the 5th meeting of the International Gaming Alliance, but this is the first we've been able to do presentially. We will be talking now about complying with rules, regulations that reach people, clients, users, or stakeholders, depending on the point of view. They may all be affected by the crime in gambling, and it can alter the whole system. And this is very complicated. And what is important is that the regulation can help in programs and policies which can benefit gamers or gamblers who find complexities and whenever it affects their experience of gaming. So David, please, could you tell us who will be participating in this roundtable? Hello, good morning. We will now begin debating roundtable number 2. My name is David from the National Police Service, David Galbete. I've been in this position for 3 months, and I'm very proud to be able to represent the National Police Force in this speciality that is so important and that it involves so much responsibility. We work in hand with a strategic industry, a very professional, very qualified industry, and so we will come to a good end. We will now call the speakers of this second round table. Beñat Manuel Fuentes is the head of the gaming unit and the shows and gaming unit of the Archancha Police Force. Agustin Castaminza, who is the main inspector of the security of the Navarre Police Force. Javier Salvador, sub-inspector of the Central Unit of Gaming and Spectacles of Catalonia. José Sánchez Fallos, the general coordinator of COFA. Karen Sierra, Vice President for Latin American and Caribbean for Gaming Labs International. And finally, Juan Carlos Gil Muñoz, the section head of the National Office for Sports. Okay, we will try to ensure that the second debate will talk about something different, which is responsible gaming and safe gaming, and how in the different police units, in the different regions and autonomies in Navarre, the Basque Country and Catalonia, and how we deal with this in order to get responsible gaming. We have the honor also of having Karen, who will give us a view from Latin America, which is quite different to what we are familiar with here in Europe. Then we also have the honor of having José Sanchez Fallos, who's the General Coordinator of COFAR, who will give us a regulatory strategic vision from the Confederation of Enterprise. In order not to lose any more time, we can begin, for example, with José Sanchez Fallos, who's the General Coordinator of the Spanish Confederation of Business, that was set up in 1994. And his long experience, he will tell us about regulation and responsible gaming, and I think it'll be a very interesting presentation from him. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the National Police Force for welcoming us in their facilities and congratulate InfoPlay for these 5th meetings. And I wanted to stress on the fact that InfoPlay from the beginning began to work with responsible gaming when nobody knew what that meant really, and now it is a concept that is used all the time together with regulations and compliance. But since this roundtable was about compliance, I was asked to talk a little bit also about the concept of responsible gaming. I've called it regulation, compliance, and responsible gaming. The industry has been working with regulation compliance for many years, and then suddenly there's a third path that is not any less important, which are social responsibility and responsible gambling or gaming. I will begin with regulation. I always, when I have the opportunity of talking here or countries that I'm invited to, I try to praise the Spanish regulatory model because without doubt, I think it is the best in Europe. It began with the rules in the Home Office in Spain, and which was then passed to the regions in their organic laws and subsequently to all the regulations. And there are two reasons for this regulation. Generally, it has allowed this industry to develop. It has allowed companies in the different channels, casinos, bingos, betting shops, any gaming channel have been able to develop the activity. We look at the activity of these companies since the early regulations, when it was when gambling was depenalized. It has all progressed very reasonably, and at the same time, there is another aspect which any public administration or regulation has to face, and that is to protect users, particularly when we're talking about gambling, with health policies, public order policies. Everything surrounding gaming, gambling, has meant that this model that has been developed in Spain over 40 years now has allowed us to have figures of addiction, which is among the lowest in Europe. This is empirical. The Ministry of Health, in its report, says that 0.3% are affected of those who gamble, and there are about 7,000 patients per year of the 22 million who gamble. So I think the model has been a success. On the one hand, companies have grown, and on the other hand, no problem has been created that with an activity that gambling can give rise to. And when I'm asked what is the key of the success of the Spanish regulations, I think it's very simple. And we've been able to build all the regulations based on this. The more accessible a game is for a citizen, the less intensity that has to be. But some countries have switched that around, and that has generated problems. But with this, we can build the regulation system that we have in the system. And I always present it with a pyramid. In other words, at the top of the pyramid, we would have the casinos. this is the furthest away from gamblers and where there's the most largest amount of intensity. In the middle area, there's bingos and gaming, betting shops, and then at the lowest part is the slot machines or machines in hotels, in restaurants, which is what is most accessible to citizens, so should have less gaming intensity. This was as it was originally. At this moment in time, perhaps this is not a pyramid, or it's probably a trapezium right now, because the casinos in the initial phase, a lot of regulations are 30 kilometers away from the cities. Now they are found within the cities and towns. The gaming offerers are much greater, and what has been more stable really are the some gaming machines in restaurants and bars, because that is an accessory product for a bar, and so it should not have a higher level of gaming. There's a portfolio in Casania. You can do almost in the bingos. You can do almost everything in shops. Each channel is regulated according to its specific nature, and this is what we called organized supply or offering, because each channel, inspired on the principle that I was mentioning before, more intensity, more accessibility, less intensity of gaming, and that is how the activity is varied. This may seem simple. It is in fact not, because when the offering is not organized or there is a dysfunction, this affects the whole system. Why? Because gambling is very liable to negative reputation problems. Anything that can occur in one of the channels, or any minimum incident, has its repercussions throughout the entire activity. I'll give you an example of what I'm referring to, but it could be, I like to give the example of, in business schools, they put this, it's a basket of cherries, 3 kilos of beautiful cherries, and we put in a cockroach, and then it is immediately contaminate the whole basket. Nobody wants to see it, and just because of one cockroach, it didn't even move. It was there. The whole basket is contaminated. It was the other way. It was a basket of cockroaches, and you put in a cherry. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen to the cockroaches. So the same thing happens with gambling. Any incident that we have in one channel or in a subsector produces reputational harm to the industry as a whole. I'll give you the example that you might be familiar with, what happened in England very recently with some machines that were installed in betting shops, which were called FBT, betting machines, and it does not follow the general. And these machines, you could gamble £100 every 20 seconds. You could spend £100, and there were 35,000 accessible, uncontrolled betting shops. And what happened over time, this generated huge problems of public order. People committed suicide. It was really a big problem. Installed, and the sector, the industry made a mistake. The betting sector made a mistake because they ordered them machines. Nobody wanted those machines. They installed it because they had a strong lobby in the betting industry, and the government or administration for allowing it. And that's an example. If you you reverse the rules of very accessible, less low intensity, then you find, if you reverse that, then you find these problems. I think that the way that we have dealt with the industry, laws and regulations constantly being adapted. I don't like when something is modified because it's an old law. It could be very good. You don't have to change it because it's an old regulation. You have to change it because there's a technological innovation or new modality of gambling. I don't like the changes because of ideology either. because ideology should not regulate activities, because I might like something and someone else might not like it. You have to do it more horizontally, but really all regions have regulations that have evolved over time that are presided. I'm talking very broadly, but with this, nobody can if a game is very accessible, it cannot have high intensity. And if there are access controls, then they can offer things that enable elevating the level of gambling. When we now, having talked about regulation, we'll talk about compliance, which has to be important for this industry. I think the sector complies. Here you have the results of the inspections carried out by all the different police forces, regional and national. It is reasonable, and that goes together because the regulation is good, because the employers are convinced that the regulation is good, and we are very thankful for having very specialized police forces that know the sector very well and are very competent in analyzing it. So in compliance, there's little to say, but except that we have to accentuate it. I like the Anglo-Saxon regulatory model, and here it's more higher barriers and low controls, but I prefer low controls, but then a lot of control. But nowadays, regional and national police forces are monitoring this industry well enough to be able to perfectly detect any anomalies. And then there's the responsible gaming and responsibility. This is difficult, particularly in hyper-regulated sectors, because we're already exhausted by all of these regulations, and now there are operating requirements. You need to have guarantees and so forth. So you comply with all that, and then on top of that, you have to think about responsible gambling or responsible gaming. This came about with corporate social responsibility that came from the United States. They didn't only want to have a very good profit and loss account for investors. You not only have to have good products that the public accepts, but you have to have ethics and commitments with society. And it's difficult to convince companies, not large groups. Large groups and companies know that, but the industry in general find it difficult, and particularly when they are so regulated from the start. It's very difficult for them to take on these, because what we had was the regulations of the region, and then we think that just by complying, that's it. I don't need to take that extra step. If I have the regulations that is passed in the region, I comply. These people supervise me, and I do my activity. I don't have to do anything more. So I'm exhausted because of the high level of regulation, and then I'm asked to do something more and include social responsibility policies. Then that's hard for us to swallow. And fortunately, in Spain, all the different channels have now joined this. Each channel does. We are developing with that for bars and restaurants. And for me, responsible gaming is the way you have to work. We have to follow the compliance, the regulatory compliance, and above that, social responsibility policies, in our case, responsible gambling or gaming. And this is like a regulatory plus. So regulation gets to this point, but I take that extra step because I can have a machine that is certified in the Basque Country, for example. I'm a company there, or I have all my authorizations, and I can work with it. What we want to do is that with that machine, you can game or play, gamble in an organized way. We have to give informed instructions so that if anyone plays or gambles excessively, this is a minority of cases, you know that. Undoubtedly, you know the industry very well. But we see somebody who is gambling in an aggressive way or who is losing control of their gambling, so that the pub or bar owner has the minimum tools to be able to guide that person, detect that person, and direct the person to entities who deal with those kinds of things in order to prevent incidents which we don't want. Nobody could fine me. None of you could come to a bar and fine us because you're gambling a lot. But we don't want that. We want it to be a reasonable thing that we offer, and it's 0 point. We're the second country in Europe with lowest rate of gambling incidents. So for that, we have created this program of responsible gaming. Each channel has its own. Ours is basically a training program. What we do is we give restaurants, bars and pubs guidance for good practice, best practices, and for responsible gaming. It's very straightforward because this is talking to staff in pubs and bars and owners, and that we give stickers and we give training to the professionals so that if there's an incident, they know how to deal with it. This is done regional in the different autonomous communities in Spain, in the Basque Country. Each association deals. We have 150,000 establishments that have been registered, and we want to give a secure environment, guarantee the supervision of gambling, to allow gambling only to people of sufficient age, and there's a multinational audit by CGS that verifies that that training that we were giving has been received well, and that they can answer correctly the questions. And we've had the audit results, which will be presented in each regional, but really the results have been pretty good. And I would like to conclude with what I started with the title: we want good regulation, which we have among the best around, a high degree of compliance or greater, and then to generate responsible gaming in all the different gaming channels. And that's it from me right now. Thank you very much for this new roadmap for Spain, so that we can all follow your example. Now we'll give the floor to the Basque Country, Euskadi. Beñat Manuel Fuentes. With regard to the regulatory compliance, each autonomous region community has many laws, rules, bylaws. In the Basque, you have, to give 3 or 4 examples, there's Decree 2016, which was recently modified by Decree 19 of 2022. That's a very recent modification. And in your regulations, in your legislation, through Decree 414 of 2008, you created the Basque Gaming Observatory as a centralized service of investigating and researching the situation of gaming in the Basque Country in order to seek prevention of crisis situations and to encourage responsible gaming. And in your region, please let us know what work have you done in your department in order to achieve that responsible gaming, that responsible gambling, given these new technologies that go together with this activity. Hello. I'd like to start by saying good morning to everybody. I would like to thank you for the opportunity of being here with you all. I've met some of you already, and I think that indeed the regulations in the Basque Country is an active, and here's the director of leisure shows. And there is trust and confidence in the police that inspects. That's us. This is a little bit our visiting card. The Chancha, the police force, are celebrating its 40th anniversary. In 1983, the unit for gaming was created 1 year after the force was created. And then, so we have a police force that has a long history in acting in the gaming industry, and we interact with the people which work in this industry and have this very complex industrial activity. We know it very well because we know the people who carry out this business activity, and what we clearly understand is that we are undergoing a process so that the rules can be complied with in a normal way. So we deal with each other directly, and when there is an inspection, it is the end of a process where the unit of gaming and shows has played a role from the beginning. I'll give you an example. Since the unit was set up, the unit for gaming and shows was the first lab, and it was almost certified, but if it wasn't, that made tests in the gaming machines that were installed in the Basque Country. So shortly afterwards, the certified laboratories were included in the logical process of laboratory inspection of the machines. And that became permanent in the unit. So we have a technical office. We call it the lab. And this technical lab intervenes at the request of the Department for Gaming whenever somebody makes a request through, when they file for it, the certification of a gaming machine. This is an activity that is carried out by our police force. As soon as we get the documents, the reports, the machine's documentation, the manufacturer documents, and the lab report, that is delivered to my unit in the Basque Police Force in order to analyze and make and draw up a report of everything that is being presented. Are we fulfilling the regulation? That we have a checklist, and it is complicated, as David was referring to it before. And sometimes there may be some doubts, and then all the technical characteristics of the machine are examined in accordance with the regulation. This, before it is certified, is sent back to the department, which is the department that finally certifies, has an additional element, and that is that not only what the manufacturer present, but that the unit for gambling and gaming in the police force, the lab gives a lot of confidence. And finally, when the machine is set up and gets working in any restaurant, pub, or casino, bingo, the inspection unit begins to see how the machine actually works, not just from the reports. So somebody who has a new machine sometimes gets tired of seeing us because we go back many times to visit that business in order to get to know the machine. So we have, in fact, started up a handbook for, we don't need to be guided to do the inspection. The only thing we need to do is for the machine to be opened up for us. And in that manual or handbook, we have an inspection procedure, a protocol that it goes together with an explanation. The explanation is the product, the result of 39 years of experience with machines. We have photographs, and the inspector, with that guidance, fully well knows that that machine is working as it should be. So the end of the report says that the machine is fine. If there were a situation where there is any anomaly or non-compliance or anything that is strange, then the laboratory would come in, the technical department, there would be a new check, and there would be a forensic inspection to back that up. In the prior reports to certification, we in our unit, we have 35 points for inspection with reports. With the manufacturer and the laboratory, we look at 35 different chapters that have to be complied with. And if there are any doubts anywhere there, then the department goes to the person, the appropriate person, in order to look for clarifications. In the ordinary inspections, we look at between 12 and 15 different points, and the handbook now has registered 85% of the machines that are functioning right now in our region. So each model, each machine has its own personalized inspection system. You don't do the same inspection with one machine as with another. Depending on where we're going, we do a different type of inspection depending on how much we know the machine and we know where to go. The level of compliance, as you said, just is very high. Technically speaking, the manufacturers know very well what they're doing. And I think there are few industries really that invest so much in technology and talent to generate an end product, which is a machine that has many people, many hours of work, many teams, and a lot of leadership and a lot of investment to come into existence. So it's very difficult to find machines that may have any anomalies. It might have something that could be improved, but what is true is it is important to know, and the gaming industry in the Basque Country knows this, that the gambling unit has the ability to inspect like a police force, and because we are a police force, so we work 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, at most difficult times, with the intensity that is required or necessary. And if we need to be there longer, then we have that capacity. My division head is here, and my head of criminal investigation is there. So if we need any reinforcement, we all work together to achieve that. So we, in the investigation process, as responsible gaming, we have knowledge from the very beginning of the process of certifying the machine. We know very well what the machine, what kind of a machine we have. It won't surprise us. We don't go to the machine to be surprised, but we go there to inspect it and to confirm what we already know, and then we do a follow-up. There are many gaming machines, about 12,000 in the Basque Country, and they are distributed all around the territory of 5 different of the 3 provinces. There are gaming casinos, betting shops, and it requires thorough inspection, properly targeted. We know when we have to press the accelerator or the brake. We do shows also, and there are many shows, bullfighting, fireworks, concerts, and where many people gather. And so we have to coordinate our efforts and guide our activity, the activity of the inspectors, to something that is very specialized. And we include, and we have constant ongoing training, of course, as is necessary. We try to work with other colleagues from other units, from other police forces, talking with them. We learn, we see how they work. So IT applications that can be of use to us, we can use in our own system and implement them. And in the Basque Country, the activities of the Ertzaintza police force, I think, has no longer bothersome, I think, for most people in the industry. We are working a lot with the self-prohibited and with minors. In 2020, with the pandemic, has data that is different, but there's more 4,000 visits that were made to check whether there were any children gambling. So we are there permanently at the entrance, at the exit, looking. We look at the counters to see whether, and the meters to see the prior gambling outside hours, outside legal hours. So we look to confirm. We don't look to pursue. That is very important. The gaming sector, I'm talking on behalf of the Chancha police force, in the regulatory maintenance, confirming that things are being complied with, the sector has stability. Without the activity and the inspection of the police in the gaming sector would be very highly vulnerable. We heard it in the previous debate, and we will probably listen to this again in the next roundtable, but it is necessary that everybody should understand that including the police force, the Chancha police force, in the normal business activity is not only an interesting thing to do, but at this moment in time, it is in fact also essential, and compliance of the regulations. In our case, we also participate at the request of our director in the technical discussions to develop new future orders for machines and sites, so that we have technical know-how, expert know-how, and we have a view that gives the experience of 39 years with thousands of inspections per year in a very standardized and targeted way. So we are involved in the process of the standardization, normalization of, and we participate, and then there is the political side where they take the decisions they deem. Well, thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thank you very much for your presentation and for your words. I completely agree with you. Without that regulation, without the presence of the security forces and police forces, we realize, and in organized crime will create its web and will empower itself of the sector, and that is why our presence is so terribly important. And now, thank you, Emmanuel. We'll give the floor now to Agustin Castaminza from the region of Navarre. As I said, for the Basque Country, I was looking at your regulations also. It's very varied also in your region of Navarre. I found law of the 14th of December of 2006. And it was also recently modified on the 1st of July. And this law, the main aim concentrated on three things, really, which has brought us together here, and that is the prevention of addiction, protection of minors and unprotected groups, and encouraging responsible gaming. These are the main principles of this law. As I mentioned with Emmanuel before, could you tell us also how in the region of Navarre you try to achieve that responsible gaming and gambling? Thank you very much. I will get up.
Thank you so much. Amendment of the law introduces important changes. First of all, I am pleased to be here. I would like to thank the organizers for giving us regional police force the opportunity to be here. Thank you very much, Jacqueline, for your interest in having us here. I have not been in this position for a long time yet. I would like to make my contribution. It is the first time that our police force takes part in this type of summit, and I would like to tell you a bit about our background, our history, and also I will share with you which are the three main elements that lead to the success of a good arrangement or control of our sector. So first of all, the legal framework that supports our work, how all that is implemented through our inspection and control plan for gambling and shows, and how all that is made or implemented, and as I say, the work of administrative police and police officers in general. After that brief introduction about what we are and who we are, since the 8th century, Navarra has had institutions with functions which are similar to those that police forces have now. There are several references to enforcement agencies carrying out the same work that we are carrying out today. In 1809, there was already a group of police forces, and then, as I say, in 1864, the name was changed to Foral Police Forces. We are 1,100 police officers, and we have 6 police stations. We have competencies in gambling since 1981, and we control that industry, that sector. I will make a reference to the regulatory framework. The organic law gave to Navarra the exclusive competencies to control casinos and betting shops. That law was revoked, and another one was approved in 2006 that has been amended recently, 1st of July this very same year, and came into force 14th of July when it was published in the official Gazette. It introduces significant novelties, focusing on the 3 axes that David mentioned. That is to say, the obligation of the Department of Education to develop specific programs for the prevention of ludopathy and problematic behavior in gambling and gaming. There is explicit mention to that. A number of obligations are set out for the sector, training to employees, as well as regulations about the minimum distance between casinos, betting shops, and distance to schools, also control of access, and it is set out in the regulation. Well, now we are seeing in the market significant or interesting solutions when it comes to controlled access. Anthropometric controls in Navarra, we have a company, probably you have heard of it. Oh, I can't remember the name. It went off my mind. All right, thank you. Oh, Dasgate. That's the name of it. It's a Navarran company that works very efficiently in this sector. It is already operating in the banking sector, in the gaming and sector. They do facial recognition. They have been very effective in this sector. So there is an element with well, there are these aspects. It is not fully finished in the regulation. And now let us talk about the ecosystem where we operate. We are a small region and we only have 645,000 inhabitants. The sector is quite small. There aren't any casinos. We have 59 gaming salons, 9 betting shops, some 2,000 slots, and 1,500 betting machines. For that, well, we have a unit of gaming which is made up of 16 people, which falls in the Department of Police Forces. It works in direct coordination with this unit of gaming and shows, which falls under the Regional Ministry of Interior. The inspection plan is a working tool that has as its aim prioritize and control inspection works, so that inspectors are aware of the reality of the sector and therefore can correct or penalize those behaviors that are out of law. It is also intended, or as one of its competencies, is to ensure that gaming is carried out following all the regulations. There are a number of measures that are included in those programs. There are some technical requirements, some timing requirements. It is mandatory to carry out 2 inspections in bingos twice a month. Betting shops, 1 inspection is to be done every 3 months. And regarding slot machines, it is established that they are inspected on an annual basis. I will finish off by mentioning the work that the administrative police carries out. This is the work that we conduct. This is highly specialized work. As Imanol said before, training is extremely important. We give utmost importance to training. Rules and regulations are changing and we need to be updated. We have a basic training, initial basic training, and then we do ongoing learning. At least twice a year, we have specific training sessions. And as non-formal education, we also have a specific meetings for best practices, meaning that the people with top knowledge in the unit teach or transfer their knowledge to the rest of the members of the unit. This is essential for police officers to carry out their job properly. We also have normalized process of work, guiding the work carried out by police officers so that everyone works in a consistent manner. We have experienced and we have seen, we are aware of the need to have good internal communication systems. We work in shifts, and work in shifts is a great enemy of communication. Where everyone works in the same location, the same business hours, communication is flowing. But when we work in different shifts, sometimes the communication is not that flowing. So we make a special effort to ensure, or to significant effort to ensure that communication is flowing. None of this will be successful if each and every one of the police officers wouldn't be motivation. We want to keep up the motivation of administrative police officers. There is lots of routine work. We are talking about thousands of inspections to machines, and that is tiring over time. We make a significant effort to remind our officers what's the purpose of the work, what are the achievements that they have gotten, what can they do to improve the way they work and to be more efficient, so that we want the sector to work properly and so that citizens can enjoy gaming and gambling. And of course, the sector requires utmost respect and, well, to minimize inconveniences. Thank you so much, Agustin, for your great presentation. Now I would like to give the floor to a Catalonian Autonomous Community, Xavier Salvaro. Well, I've took a look at your regulations. You have decree laws. You have the law back from the 19th century. In 2015, decree 163, 25th of July, that was an amendment of previous amendments passed in decrees in 2004 and 2005. You have compiled them in the last decree law. We also have a regulation for betting and gambling. Xavier would like you to share your experience in terms of compliance of all these rules and regulations with an aim to delivering responsible gaming and protecting citizens. Thank you so much for your kind introduction. I would like to thank National Police Force and organizers of this summit for inviting us to be here with you today. And it is a great pleasure to be in this wonderful space and to participate in this meeting. As Manuel mentioned before, well, we will also share our business card with you. For those of you who don't know how we work, what is the family of administrative police officers like, this is for you to have a snapshot of who we are and what we do. The territorial structure of our regional police forces is structured in 9 territorial units. In each of them, we have a regional administrative unit, and there is a single central unit. So we have this dot in the middle, and has those other circles around. Okay, that is the central unit. Having said that, so what is our structure like? We belong to the Central Area of Administrative Police, which reports to the territorial unit, and there are 3 central units, one for private security, the other one for gaming and shows, and the other one relevant activities for safety of citizens. What are the functions that we do have as central unit? First of all, we produce the plan which will guide our inspection activities. We carry out monitoring and inspections of the work that our units carried out on site. We respond to any technical queries, and we deliver necessary support to our units on site, either through technical inspections or through our personnel. We also make inspections consistent. We want to deliver consistency, and we want all our units to work in a consistent manner across the territories. We do that through technical guidances, through work protocols, etc. When it comes to legal gaming, we are leaders of all the investigations that may be carried out. Also important is to say that we, from the central unit, we analyze all the crimes that have been committed within the gaming and gambling, and we are interlocutors between the public administration and the gaming sector. Now I'd like to tell you about our plan of action. It's an action plan for the gaming sector. It is a police document that has been agreed with the DG of Taxation and Gaming. As you know, this unit reports to the Ministry of Economy and the Treasury. It guides, this plan guides our inspection activities, both carried out from the central unit and across the territory. The document is the result of an analysis of very many aspects that have been analyzed and that inform our report and guide our activities. And it is very sensitive when it comes to responsible gaming. For instance, when it comes to self-prohibition and gaming by minors. General elements or units of citizen safety They are engaged to respond to requests that they may receive on the street. Here I'm referring to potential problems that authorized gaming centers may have, for instance, elements regarding minors or self-prohibitions. And then we move on to specialization levels. For the territorial units, we start the regional units and then more globalized specialization dealing with the central area of administrative police. That's where we work. We have three structures and three big sections. First, analysis of criteria to carry out a good number of inspections. We also define a number of objectives in our plan, objectives that will lead us to produce the number of inspections to be carried out. What is the purpose of this planning? Of this plan of actions? It is basic to set out tangible, specific objectives, and in most of those cases, well, the objectives are quantifiable. We want to carry out consistent inspections throughout the territory. We produce an inspection table. We design the specific actions for both the regional units as well as the central unit. And this allows us to have understanding of the KPIs that would allow us to carry out quantitative analysis of the activities carried out by the different units. This is the register of gaming in Catalonia 2022. This is a starting basis that helps us analyze and therefore produce the table of inspections that I mentioned before. So machine B or slots, we have a total of nearly 36,000. Nearly 29 of them are installed. Machine C, which are gambling games in casinos, total of nearly 150, 143 installed. Then the special B machines for casinos, over 1,000, installed 992, and betting gambling machines 1,375, both total, and all of them are installed. In Catalonia, we do not have any betting shops. Betting terminals are located in the authorized gaming salons, as well as bingos and casinos. When it comes to operator companies, there are 126 of them registered. Oh, no, 396 altogether, 127 in gaming salons. In bingos, between 60 and 70. 6 of them are already effective, 10 of them are pending license. And we have 4 casinos, 2 in Girona, 1 in Tarragona, and the other one in Barcelona. Regarding register, Catalonia, we have a register of the number of premises, and if, well, for this to change, regulation should change first. Which is the objective of our inspections in 2022? As I mentioned before, we set out the objective. The objective for this year is to ensure that the gaming activities comply with the industry regulations. We also define the stakeholders that are engaged in this field, which are specialized units, both regional as well as the central one. And we also set out the stakeholders, the partners engaged, specialized units as well as the gaming industry. Then we set out the actions to be implemented. We have set out 5 different actions covering the whole spectrum of gaming. A number of inspections are established for bingos, casinos, and gaming salons. And in this case, it is mandatory to carry out perfect inspections or accurate inspections when it comes to access and minors. Here we also carried out or established the number of inspections to be carried out in slot machines. We also set out a specific number of inspections to slot machines for night clubs and sexual places. We also set out the number of inspections carried out to the warehouses of operators, and then inspections that are randomly carried out, and we report the results of them to the taxation department. The administrative regulation for these random inspections is done through previous communication. That's the reason why we do not assign any quantifiable KPI. We take action based on the information that we receive. And then when it comes to indicators, quantifiable ones are the number of places that have been inspected, the number of slot machines that have been inspected, the number of operators that have been inspected, and the number of checks that are carried out on a randomly basis.
This is the inspection chart that comes subsequently, and for 2022 there are 896 planned inspections in areas like gaming rooms, controlling minors, bingos, casinos, companies, machines, and prostitution. Said this, the machines in casinos and gaming rooms, the inspections are done also in the authorized machines. This is a document, and this is an essential document for us. It's a police document, and this is the basis to monitor the targets for the units and to monitor the compliance of regulations. Here there are various columns for inspectors, and then there are the indicators with the inspections and the targets. We analyze to what extent the percentages of targets are achieved and what is detected with regards to non-compliance of regulations. This is the same, but with gaming machines in establishments of all kinds. And finally, there's a compliance comparison from 2015-2019. This is a pre-pandemic period, which I've taken because with all the restrictions in 2020, we would be giving data that are not concise or reflective of the situation. So this slide, as you can see, the non-compliance detected over 5 years is low and it is acceptable, and therefore we can conclude that the gaming industry in Catalonia is committed to the regulation that regulates its activities. Said this, I think I can finalize my presentation. I hope that you've liked it, and any doubts that we can clarify, we will be pleased to do so. Thank you very much, Javier, for your presentation and your talk. We will now give the floor to our colleague from the National Police Force, Juan Carlos Gil Muñoz. He's the head of the section for the National Bureau for Sports. He's going to talk from his position and what he does, and with his experience in the National Sports Office, how do they deal with the new technologies which affect responsible gaming? Thank you. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. I'm a little bit different to the specializing of our colleagues, but we are in charge of the management of sports and violence in sports. There's the sports law of 1990 that was later reformed in 2007 to mention xenophobia, and just like our colleagues in the Mossos in Catalonia and the Achancha in Basque country, we fight violence in extreme groups related to sports. And then with betting, gambling, this is all overlights. We know that it is match fixing, illegal betting. So what we do together with the La Liga is we gather all that information, then we give it to our legal experts who investigate. What we find most are, we have the data collectors, and together with working with La Liga, they have the tools. We look at the membership of the peoples and we pass on the information to the judicial department that carries out the investigation. What we do in the office is the huge amount of information that we deal with. Professional football, for instance, all pitches have an organization control unit. These are the entry controls and cameras. We have up-to-date cameras in La Liga, and in all football pitches we have internal and external cameras. Very often legal colleagues do an investigation. They may be interested in somebody who met somebody, or they know of somebody that is being investigated and they need more data. So we can provide that data with that whom that person met in the stadium, where they went to the stands or wherever, the moment they went into the stadium, and all of the data is dealt with, and there is information that is added and gathered. There's facial entry recognition, fingerprints, and then FT technology. Any technology that they can think of, they use that, and that generates a lot of information that we have available, and that can be useful for the work that they have to do, because this is throughout the country in professional football and first and second division, Premiership, the top division. So the events organizer, which is La Liga, together with the football clubs, give the facilities. The La Liga installs all the systems, and the police forces, the Mossos, the National Police, or the Achancha Police Force, we deal with the daily management of those systems. So what I'm saying is that there's a huge amount of information that is generated, and it's available to investigators whenever they ask for it. So we work mainly with violence, but we can use images or data for any other system also. We are the national information point for football in Spain. But this is there's a European network. Each country in the EU and others outside the EU have created this national information point where we exchange all kinds of data and information concerning displacements. For example, a Champions League match. When fans from other countries come, we look at the number of whether there are violent fans, and we look for the collaboration with those countries. There are protocols that are standardized in Europe in order to request the support of police forces that are familiar with the particular fans of the teams, and they come to collaborate with in the same way that we also travel abroad when our teams play away, and they ask for that collaboration. So all teams in first and second division, but also in the basketball ACB and professional category sports, all teams have a security coordinator, and that is a police officer who is in charge of the mechanism, and they get in touch with the clubs, with the fan clubs, and so they have a lot of information that can be useful to you for fixing and betting. It could be useful, and the coordinator will be able to get first-hand information when report notes are made when something happens where there's a suspicion. La Liga has quite sophisticated programs about betting, and when they see that there are peaks or abnormal betting for a sports event, that brings about suspicion about what might be happening. If the La Liga sees that, they pass it on because something might have happened there. The same with the gambling or betting. When we see the odds or any particular information, we collaborate with the clubs and we make an informative memo so that the legal department can work with it. And this gives us a lot of work. But so last season there were 1,600 proposals for fines or punishments for non-compliance of the law. Just like in the gaming sector, in the sports sector, the laws are very regulated, and the functions of the clubs, what they have to comply with is very well laid down, like entrance and searches, and we are open to other mechanisms. Drones also is something that is in fashion at the moment. It's not. It can affect us in the end, because imagine in a large stadium a drone comes in, it can stop a match with the public order problems that can be generated along with that. And in Spain, as well as in Europe, there could be friendly drones that try to get a picture, or some with a protest or something. But fortunately, we haven't had any attack drones yet with explosives or anything, but it could happen. So essentially, there is a tool in the sports world, and there are many cameras. The Bernabeu Stadium has about 200 cameras, even though it's under building work at the moment. And this generates information that can be useful. And that's all from me. This is what I wanted to convey to you all. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your talk presentation, Juan Carlos. You referred to various sports regulations, not so much for responsible gaming, but it does seek the responsible behavior of the consumers of sports spectacles, particularly for football. And that has to go together with the protection of other citizens and consumers of all of these spectacles. Thank you very much, Juan Carlos, for your presentation. And now we'll give the floor to Karen Sierra, finally. She will be surprising us. I'm convinced she will be surprising us, because apart from that she's not wearing a uniform, which is going to give us a different view, she's going to talk about gaming in Latin America. And for many of us, it is an unknown field, and it's very different to the situation that we're familiar with in Spain or Europe. Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Can you put my presentation up on the screen, please? Thank you. Well, whilst it comes up, thank you very much. Thank you, Mariela. Thank you everyone for allowing me to be here in this meeting together with us. For us, really, personally and as a company, it is an honor to be here in GLI. We have always worked with and based ourselves on Spanish regulations. That is how our operations began, together with many Spanish companies that came to our countries. And so we are very highly influenced from Spanish laws from the beginning. in our countries. I work for GLI, Gaming Labs International, and I would like to explain a little bit who we are, because not everybody here knows us. You're talking about certification, the processes for inspection. Perhaps do know us better, but other people may not. So really, we are known in the world as a laboratory of certification, but our role goes further than that, particularly in Latin American countries and in the Caribbean, where there's many prohibitions still. There aren't any gaming laws or regulation entities, and so we have a role as consultant for regulations. Also, with regards to responsible gaming, with prevention and security, we also go hand in hand with regulatory entities, but we also work with the suppliers in the industry who want to develop best practices. As you can see on the slide, there's consultancy, capacitation, certification, and safety audits. Security audits, we are accredited everywhere in the world, whether it's a certification process. There's more than 480. And globally, we are present in all continents. Our central office is in New Jersey and in Spain. We have a lab in Catalonia. So we're even present here in Spain. So, as I mentioned before, our work also is aimed at law and developing regulations for gaming, and to concentrate on the two subjects that have been mentioned already, which is responsible gaming and prevention of fixing, sports fixing. And these are the things that we talk with regulators and governments when they're creating their laws and bylaws. We want to concentrate most of the regulations on the rules that are aimed towards prevention. In this case, prevention with regards to the fight against fraud and illegal gaming, problematic gaming, integrity in sports, and these are the subjects that affect us. With regards to responsible gaming, we always recommend that we should focus on interdisciplinary and interprofessional. We have proof of that here. We have the police, we have government offices, we have leagues, sports leagues, and all the different stakeholders in this system of the gaming industry. Here we're talking about gaming regulators, operators, suppliers, also manufacturers. In the case of responsible gaming, it's always very recommended to include the Ministry of Education. We were talking about this yesterday. Not only because they support us with the process of internal training, as well as because of the primary and secondary schools, where we recommend that they start to talk about prevention. In the health ministries, of course, the public entities and private entities of health professionals and organizations also support these efforts for prevention and for treatment. Professional leagues in different sports in different countries, the Ministry of the Sports, the police forces whenever appropriate, and finally the academia, universities, research institutes, because we clearly believe that to develop a regulation has to be based on data, on facts, on the reality in our jurisdictions and countries, so that it is successful. With responsible games, I don't know whether there's a framework here, but we always we recommend talking about a framework of responsible gaming. This is a commitment between the regulating entities, the government, and the industry. This framework is a guide for developing regulations for responsible gaming, and with the implementation by regulated and regulators. One solution doesn't work for everybody. And here I'm going to talk about the games regulations of Massachusetts. I've had to research all the different models of responsible gaming that there are in the world. And the case of Massachusetts, this is a point of reference that we use a lot when we work. It's called positive play in English, but this is really to identify that there are differences among gamers and and the tools and possible actions that can be taken for each type of gambler or gamer has to be different. We're talking about positive player who plays for entertainment, who dedicate part of their monthly budget for entertainment and leisure and has no problem, no risk. Then we have risk gamblers and gamblers who have gaming problems. And then in order to talk about the certification, which I mentioned before in the presentations, and face-to-face and presential gaming, here we have a couple of examples. There aren't any. The standards are very broad because there are many points of prevention that have to be considered. But you talked about entry checks in Argentina, for example, in Mendoza, they hire the service of biometric systems, which is linked to the self-exclusion system in order to prevent also fraud. And there are technical standards for the certification. Among the verifications in the certification process, there is also the game design. There are requirements to ensure that the lab verifies that the game does not excessively use designs that can lead to addiction. And messages can be given on the machine depending on behavior. And with regards to monitoring also, the labs verify that there is a record of money that has been paid or betted on. And there's much more, but I only have 13 minutes, so this is an overview. With regards to the systems without cash, with electronic payments, this is something which was requested by the industry during the pandemic, but because they didn't want to use cash. So in some jurisdiction, it was allowed to use electronic means of payment with QR codes and so forth in order to add credit to the machines. But in cases where this type of technology is permitted, and this includes loyalty, we have an additional tool in order to understand the behavior of the player and detect a problem with a specific gambler. This is a little bit like the monitoring in the online gaming industry. This is copied from our Peruvian regulator, but in the diagram you can see that it is a requirement sometimes that in coin machines should be interconnected to a system. The system, what it does is to receive information of all the different machines, slot machines, physical data that the regulator wants to use for their checking process at the beginning. It was because of gathering paying taxes, but also there are other types of events can be reported that can support us with regards to responsible gambling or to stop fraud. And so what the lab does is to verify that those systems really receive the information correctly in the format established by the regulator. And some jurisdictions, like Peru, some provinces in Argentina, they all have their own regulations depending on the region, but in order not to go into detail, I will mention Colombia, United States, not in all states, but and I was mentioning Massachusetts as an example in order to use it as a point of reference for the industry. But when we talk about the modernization of access to the game's contents, then we come into online gaming and online betting. And I think for those of you here, online gaming, this has to be very basic. But for those who don't work in gaming online, may be more interested in this. I can say this about the law. This law was very supportive for our jurisdictions in Latin America. Obviously, we're gaining experience and we're also improving our processes as we're going along, and that is where collaboration among different jurisdictions comes in. And online gaming, what is fundamental, and for responsible gaming and for preventing fraud, for example, is to identify the people. It is always very important to clearly understand that the identification process has to have some requirements. It has to be established by regulation. We cannot presume that any operator in any unregulated jurisdiction is following these practices. It has to be properly established in regulation. One of these things is the confirmation of the identity of the person and the age. And you can normally do this by consulting the civil registry, for example, in Buenos Aires. But in Colombia, for example, with that type of access to technologies, they use the private service that exists in order to be able to identify the people with the civil register. In Colombia, for example, they also bear in mind the nationality and domicile. Regulations also go to the detail of having requirements for the passwords that play for it to be secure, alphanumeric, and so forth. And also to validate that the person is not in a self-excluding list or prohibited players, because there are still jurisdictions that do not have that facility yet for operators, and that is something that could exist and should be developed, particularly national self-exclusion lists, because there can be lists per operator. But if you have a self-exclusion list at a national level, we cover the entire territory, and self-imposed limitations. This is all creating not only money or time limitations, but a person may think that they have greater risk with a specific type of game, poker or whatever, and it can be limited depending on the type of game. Also, now, with regards to responsible gaming and the tools that online gaming provides us with, here we have the self-exclusion mechanism has to be straightforward, simple, so the person can have quick access to it, and the process can be simple for them, so that there are no difficulties, so that they can reconsider stopping being self-excluded. So that there's a chronometer, so that they can see how long they've been playing in the game session. Information about the risk, information that is always available, for example, on the player screen, and that the message is clear that it is prohibited for minors, the prohibition of a negative account, and advice online, access to helplines. In some jurisdictions, there's number 1-800 or other numbers where people can get into call, and there can be chats also where people can communicate directly with some representative who can direct them to tools. These are just all examples, but there are messages to the gamblers also signaling how much time they've been gambling or how much money they've spent. They can create a gambling account and then to show them that they've been spending too much time gambling or there's too much expense. We recommend also self-diagnosis surveys that can be used and which are also available for many operators and regulators. And with regards to integrity in sport, there are specific requirements like the prohibition of transfer of funds among between players to prevent collusion, and detection of suspicious situations and transactions. The regulator requires the inclusion of this kind of aids in the platform, and location of the player and identification of the device that they are using. That is the other part now. With regards to the traceability of data, and this was mentioned also before, for online gaming and for gaming in presence, we have reports that will analyze where there could be a risk. In Latin America, we have the example of Panama, where regulators receive operator reports on demand In Buenos Aires, for example, the regulator has direct access to the operator's platform in order to get those reports. And in Colombia, they follow the Spanish model, which is the inspection system, which is the external database where regulators can get the reports in the format laid down in the regulations. And what information will we get in these reports? It'll allow us to analyze the bets, the types of bets, the date and our total amounts, type of betting results, all that is to do with the betting, and then events and games. And when we're talking about events, we're talking about sports events, casino games, live casino. The information is reported in such a way that the regulator can analyze by type of event, by type of game in the same way. They will be able to see what a person bets over a specific period of time, how long has been spent gambling, limits laid down if there is self-exclusion. It can be for a specific amount of time, it can be for 2 years, for 5 years, or it can be indefinite. So it is important also to analyze how that gambler, after they return from being self-excluded, if the behavior has improved, to determine whether the mechanism has worked or not. That is important in the reports. Also, significant events, for example, funds transfers or the withdrawal of funds beyond certain limits. Cybersecurity for online gaming is fundamental. I'm not going to go in detail about that. That is part of the audits. And finally, data. Data is very important, and in order to be able to define and start investigation and analyses that will allow us to see whether regulation is effective, whether we have to modify it or change it in order to really achieve the objectives that we are seeking. And I'm going to go through this very quickly now, but I did want you to see the slide quickly. In some of our regulators also invest in advertising, digital advertising, company advertising in social networks. In Colombia, it's very special. It's one of the jurisdictions that at most they invest not only in advertising in order to prevent problematic gaming, but also to raise awareness about legal gaming and to keep citizens out of illegal gaming. And this is for Jamaica, also in the Caribbean, for regulations for responsible gaming at an institutional level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Karen, for your wonderful presentation and for sticking to the time allotted to you. Are there any questions for Karen? Good morning. Well, this is not a question, but a brief reflection, rather. First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude to the police forces. I would like to thank you for your compliance, for your help. If there wouldn't be that level of compliance, regulation that has been designed or thought to protect citizens, without that level of compliance would not be possible, would not happen. It has also been clear the high level of compliance, commitment, and social corporate responsibility efforts. We are training people on responsible gaming and other themes that are related to it, and it has also been evidenced the big effort made by the law enforcement agencies, both national and regional, to carry out or to have accurate control and supervision of the sector. And now the challenge regarding private gaming, and to protect all the citizens, we need to think about what to do with some movements of groups that are outside the regional law and that are setting up or gaming or gambling in areas that have been reserved for private gaming. So we don't really want to turn that pyramid upside down, and we want to make them responsible and accountable for that. We haven't discussed citizen safety. In 2018, Salon Operation was launched. Unfortunately, that year there was a tragedy in a game room in Madrid, in Fuenlabrada more specifically, and a business person was killed by some robbers. And unfortunately, the similar situation has taken place in Catalonia very recently. I would like to thank the regional police forces and national police forces for having arrested the criminals very soon. I would like to send out a request. The flowing conversations that we had or that we've been having should be restarted, should be resumed, so that the gaming sector, as well as the law enforcement agencies, are very well informed about everything that is taking place regarding payments, regarding, well, everything that is taking place. The raw material with which we continue to work is cash, and that is also an appealing element, a highly appealing element for criminals, you name it. And well, that was my short reflection. I would like to thank all the panelists. Thank you very much for your brief reflection, for your gratitude. It is a mutual one from the law enforcement agencies. We are fully committed to keep up, to maintain that dialogue and continue to enforce citizen safety. For a decade, I worked in organized crime and game saloon rooms. Well, unfortunately, over time, the rates went down. And, well, there came a time that it was more difficult to buy huge amounts of money as a result of installation of cameras. And, well, this is a topic that should not be neglected to avoid situations as accidents and tragedies, as the recent tragedies that we have witnessed. Any other questions? I have a question for Karen. To what extent governments are willing to embrace the data that they receive and inform the regulations with them? Well, in the case of Latin America, well, this is a good question, really good question. In Latin America, from the viewpoint, the regulations that I mentioned are already existing. We got inspiration from the Spanish models, etc., of regulations, Spanish regulations. But regarding technology, we are seeing now that operators are becoming proactive. They are asking to sit down with regulators and to work together in the drafting or drawing up of responsible gaming frameworks that will guide the measures to be implemented and adopted by the industry with an aim of preventing gaming problems. Our Latin American industry, those that are already regulated, for instance, online gaming, it is the actual industry who has started to knock at the door of governments. In some countries, that work is being carried out jointly. In Colombia, online gaming regulation was shortly launched. It had the collaboration of citizens and the joint work of the government as well as the sector. Thank you so much to our great panelists for the presentations. And now we would like to start panel discussion number 3.